Hello and welcome to CIBER Focus, your source for international business information. I'm your host, Tim Smith, and our guest today is Professor Yong-Yeol Ahn. Professor Y.Y. Ahn is an associate professor at Indiana University's School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering. He has worked as a postdoctoral research associate at the Center for Complex Network Research at Northeastern University, and as a visiting researcher at the Center for Cancer Systems Biology at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute after earning his PhD in statistical physics from KAIST in Korea in 2008. His research spans network science, data science, and computational social science. He develops mathematical and computational models and applies them to investigate questions with various domains such as sociology, health, economics, and culture. He is a recipient of several teaching awards, including the Microsoft Research Faculty Fellowship and the LinkedIn Economic Graph Challenge. Professor Y.Y., thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thanks for making the time. So, let's talk about your recent study. Please tell us a little bit about the genesis for the idea and what was behind the creation of this groundbreaking research.
Yeah, so it started with this LinkedIn's Economic Graph Challenge. So they decided, we should open our data set to the academics because it's such a unique and awesome data set. And that can contribute to so many questions in economics, business, or society, right? So they opened up the data set and asked academics, please submit what you can do with our data set. And we submitted the proposal, and fortunately, we won. So our initial thought was that due to this new automation, like machine learning, AI, right? The whole society is changing really fast, right? So to kind of react and adapt to this changing society, our society as whole, like government, like universities, we need to understand how the economics, the whole industry is changing. So we thought that, it's like exploring new place in the wilderness, for instance. So to explore somewhere we've never been there, we need to have a map. And we want to know weather forecast, right? We need to know what will happen where we are heading. And we also know what kind of tools we need to carry, right? So that was kind of the basis of the project. How can we map the whole industry and how they are related to each other? And can we provide some kind of forecast about which area is growing, which area is shrinking? And then can we associate all the skills that is associated with those emerging clusters, emerging regions or industries? So that was one of the key ideas, how, as a whole society, how can we adapt to the fast-changing economy? And another inspiration was one of my previous studies, where we look at how people in the history moved, how they was born, when and where they were born, and then where and when they died.
Sort of a global migration map of sorts.
Yeah, but not everyone. But focusing on really famous and notable people.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So the idea is, if you look at places where so many people died, that's the nicest place usually.
Yes, makes sense. Right.
Because people move to a nice place and die there. Usually you cannot control where you are born, but you can control where you live. And so by counting deaths and births and compare them, we can kind of see which area was the cultural centers in the history. So that was like one of the inspiration. So why not we look at like highly educated labor and where they move and where they end up, right? So that can give us like what are the most nicest industries and regions we can see. So this combination of these two ideas was the genesis of the proposal.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it. So that was in 2015, I believe you won the challenge from LinkedIn. You get that phone call that you love to get from a sponsoring agency with 500 million data points, people, more than 500 million?
Yeah.
So you started working and the study lasted over about a 3-year period, 3.5 years. Any surprises along the way as you started to look at that data set of more skilled workforce participants?
Yeah, so first surprise was of course the scale of the data, the extent of the data, and how difficult it is to work with the data set, large data set. But it was like amazing to look into the data set. There are like so many interesting things you can find. So for instance, we built this labor flow network, and then we analyzed the clusters, identify the clusters. And there are so many interesting clusters. Like for instance, we looked at like Silicon Valley tech industries, like what are the companies, how they form these clusters. We could see 3 clusters that we didn't really expect to see.
Okay.
So the first one was kind of first generation companies, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. So these big companies that do both online and offline products. And then there was 2 other clusters. One is kind of second generation IT companies, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. They are like really online focused. They provide online services. And then there is a third cluster which is kind of newest, like Uber, Lyft, like those companies. And if you can see the group, you can see, oh, they are like offline focused. They provide services offline.
Right.
So there is this generational clusters as well as kind of what kind of expertise you need in each cluster. And within this cluster, there are more movement of people than across.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
that was interesting. Another interesting cluster we found was credit card companies and travel industries. So there are a lot of movement between credit card companies and airlines. There are a lot of people changing jobs between these 2 types of companies. Before we see it, we didn't really expect it, but after we see it, it makes sense because all these credit cards, you get it because of the mileage.
Sure. I'm guilty of that as well, certainly.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, I appreciate it. So what can the labor flow of 500 million people tell us about the structure of the global economy?
Yeah, so people have been thinking about this concept of geo-industrial clusters for a long time. I think it was first coined by Harvard professor Michael Porter. Yeah, right. And the concept is the companies tend to form these clusters because that's the unique way to achieve kind of competitive advantages. Because once you form tight cluster geographically, then it's much easier to have the access to the right skills, and the knowledge spillover effect is strong. So if someone develops certain technology, it spill over to nearby companies, right? So it has been theorized and studied in many studies, but most studies kind of handpicked. Okay, here is a cluster of Silicon Valley IT companies. Here is an auto industry. But if you think about it, these are still like anecdotal evidences, right? And we cannot say anything about how they are related.
The core, right, I get it.
Yeah. So our goal was, if you take the network approach and look at how people move between companies, then maybe we can bring all the techniques from network science to this network to find this geo-industrial clusters. And we can analyze not only the cluster themselves, but how they are connected and related. So that's kind of main idea. And by doing that, we can kind of build a hierarchical structure between all these clusters, and we can see which clusters are connected to what kind of clusters.
Right.
Like for instance, we can see that there are a lot of India-based clusters strongly connected to like IT industry clusters, which
Makes sense.
makes sense.
And now you just validated that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And you can see also like geographical, cultural blocks and how the global economy is organized. So you can do this broad overview, but at the same time you can drill down into like really microscopic structures, like the Silicon Valley companies, how they are organized. And you can go up to see what's the global picture. And one of the key idea at the beginning was that like the most common unit of study is like countries or cities or these handpicked microclusters. Or we are talking about industries, like tech industries, auto industries. But if you just look at one of these two dimensions, it's not complete. You need to look at both together. And one of the main reasons is not right now the whole global industries is not only hyper local. So it's like San Francisco, right? Not only that, but it's also global. Like if you want to make an iPhone, it requires like the whole world to make a single piece of technology, right? So traditional studies is kind of having difficult time to break through these limitations. Like what's the unit of the study? But I think taking this network approach can give us like nice way to look into it.
Yeah, sort of the next chapter of examining the connections and probably exposing some of the ones you didn't even realize exist, or I would realize would exist. Thank you. Thanks very much. So you share that your study will provide a powerful foundation for further systematic analysis of geo-industrial clusters in the context of business strategy, urban economics, regional economics, international development, which is exciting for me and my group. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
But when you think about using this, what would some of the insights look like, YY, to benefit all these different constituent groups?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think going back to the analogy of going on a hike.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I think the main benefit is what's the global picture? What is related to what? Like seeing that and being able to monitor the dynamics. Like where is the labor flow happening between which industries? And because we can see the relatedness, we can better react. So for instance, we identified one of the cluster is shrinking rapidly. I don't know, maybe like coal industry, maybe a good example. But then we want to provide the jobs to the people who have been working in this shrinking industries, right? And then we can ask, what are the connected industries? Where are the jobs they can move on to? And that provide, like for instance, government or educational institutions, like what do we need to teach? What do we need to do to retrain people? So yeah, that comes from this knowing the relatedness between these clusters, right? So and similar types of insight can be provided for businesses, like where are the emerging markets,
Right.
where is the need, what kind of skills are emerging.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Thanks. It's very exciting to think of the possibilities, and maybe this speaks to our ability to work smarter instead of harder now, to look at these data sets, which probably will take up the next decade of your life as you continue to be contacted to explore further. And I know you shared with me you're going to look at another large data set soon of more lower skilled workforce, and then that'll be interesting to see what you draw from that. What kind of time frame before that study would maybe be released?
I don't know. I don't know.
There you
So
go.
I
Good
think
answer.
it's too early to tell.
Sure.
But I think what's important is LinkedIn data set is still biased toward like more high skilled labor, like white collar.
Right.
But it's really hard, really important to look into low wage workers because one of the biggest economic challenge we are facing is not like the prosperity of the whole society in terms of like the companies and society. We are still growing, but the issue is the strong polarization of the job market. High skill workers, they are doing really well, but low skill workers, it's getting really difficult for them because there is no way to go up the ladder. And there is a strong pressure from AI and robotics to replace a lot of the simple jobs. So I think we really need to care about what's going on in this sector of the job market. And I think that will determine how well we can adapt to the changing economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Our training programs, we focus on emerging and developing economies, and the skill training, the education, the entrepreneurship and innovation training is paramount.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to hear that a global map will help identify more of these areas and actually contribute to giving more opportunity to the people who need it most. Wai, thank you so much for coming in today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with
It's
you.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this edition of CIBER Focus. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or suggestions for future topics, please let us know at cyber, that's CIBER, at indiana.edu.